Good afternoon, everyone. This is Unusual Activity, powered by Financial Juice. This is George Avedon and Milton Marmonides. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We just wanted to have a Unusual Activity Pulse session and just discuss what's happening in the markets, something that we're seeing some interesting activities in, and pass them along to you. It won't be a hugely long program. Just wanted to send some ideas down to you and go from there. If we check of Europe, so Europe actually finished very strong. The FTSE was up 1.85%. The CAC in Paris up 2.92%. The DAX up 3.12%. IBEX in Spain up 2.97%. So clearly we had a really, if you remember from the morning, we had a really strong futures tick up as high as 25 pre-market. We do have a continuation in the SPXs. Currently we are at 1891.67. So again, we tried to reach that 1900. We got up to 1897. Certainly we had a nice stick up in a few 5-10 minutes of trading. A couple of things that we wanted to bring up. We thought that it was very interesting. One are we keep on bringing the Ebola names, and we've referenced the Ebola names in this PowerPoint. So this is not meant to be a basket of stocks, if you will, but really securities that you want to keep an eye on with respect to volatility in terms of Ebola news. And for example, there's an RPT in there. That's a real estate holding. They hold, I believe, they own malls. So that's something to keep an eye on. And the rest of them are really biotechs. There are a few, for example, Lake. They make hazmat type wearable equipment and so forth. So we want to put that on, and why it's interesting today is most of these Ebola names today are lower. Again, it could be a sentiment, it could be a market sentiment. Perhaps we're not getting huge news coming out of any quote-unquote new cases. Certainly, as you've seen in the newsroom, some quote-unquote unconfirmed rumors of perhaps another Dallas and in Ohio where the other nurse is. So again, there's a lot of conversation, but really nothing concrete. So we're seeing a little bit of a decrease in the Ebola names. So if we take a look at Lake, for example, it's actually near the low of the day, currently at 1808. Lake has been a rather significant player. You can actually see if you pull up perhaps a daily or a 5-minute chart I have. I'll switch it back briefly to here. You'll see this is just a 5-minute chart. You see here, went up to 34.75 high. Again, it's important to understand what these companies do fundamentally, and what even if it's a contract in a hospital or so forth, what that would mean for the security. So that's where the hype dies down, and you see that precipitous decline in that particular security. Let me switch back to the presentation, and if we have another chart, we'll bring that up. CBMX has also been in conversation as well. So that's the Ebola names. Key thing to keep an eye on is this notion of, if the news in Ebola starts to come back, if the news in Ebola begins to be a little bit more evasive, if you will. If it begins to impede on market sentiment, that's where you may get a kick up in these names. A few things that also outside of Ebola, certainly it's always been a focus, but will continue to be a focus. The coal and steel names. A couple of names have been higher. AKS and AKS, excuse me, still higher for the day, up 8.68%. NUE, Nucor, still higher for the day at up 1.57%. STLD, still higher on the day. X as well, and MT, CNX as well, still higher on the day. There are few coal steel names that are lower. For example, ANR, a bit lower today, down almost 10%, slightly off their lows. ACI, um, lower again, almost down 10%, about 9.19%, and BTU lower by a little over 3.5%, near the lows of the day. This is Peabody Energy. So perhaps a reason for, we did get a little bit of a kick up in some of the oil names, commodity names. So that may that may there may be a correlation with that. Couple of things also on the home builders. Now remember, we had uh, better than expected on the housing numbers this morning. We do have home builders that are higher. KBH uh, is higher by over almost 7%. TOL, Toll Brothers, also higher, almost 3%. Uh, uh, DR Horton DHI, up almost 5%. Um, Lennar, higher as well, and RYL, higher as well. Ryland, at just about 3.5%, a little bit off its high. Again, so what we're looking for here, before we let you go, what we're looking for here is, as we said, we talked about this possible capitulation in the markets yesterday, and do we have a follow through in the markets today? So what we're looking for a stronger open, stronger close. Remember, this is Friday. Volumes coming in a little bit, coming down. Excuse me, coming down a little bit. So your typical Fridays, but considering it's been a rather volatile week, we've had some levels that remain support for the S&P 500 and the Dow. We want to keep an eye on that. So we want to see a nice strong close into Friday, and that will go through the theory of capitulation. But having said that, we're coming into Monday. Continuation with earnings. We mentioned Apple. We mentioned that in the morning. That's really important. That's after hours on Monday. So the consensus is, if traders were short as the market was coming in, a great opportunity to cover coming into the weekend, because there's certainly uh, the weekend avails itself to more news and more central bank conversations and so forth. So I think that's really something important to monitor as we come into Friday. We will continue to post into the newsroom what we're seeing. We did come through, folks. If you didn't see it, there was the U.S. Baker Hughes rig count for October 17th, week over week, was 1,918. The previous was 1,930. So again, keeping an eye on where we are, and let's see, just 10-year at 2.19. So again, we're seeing a little bit of an increase in that 10-year, and also just coming through as well. OPEC, Libya's oil minister is commenting that OPEC needs to cut oil output to raise prices. Again, we've seen this come through within the last few weeks. This wrangling within OPEC, certainly Saudi Arabia, indicating that they do not want to cut production. So this notion of being comfortable with 80, certainly oil at 82.12, currently up 16 cents. So again, we're continuing to monitoring that. Let's see if we can get this market to close positive today and perhaps provide some indication. We thank you for joining us. Should you have any questions, feel free to post them in the newsroom. We'll do our best to answer them on a minute-to-minute basis. Thank you for joining us. This has been Unusual Activity Pulse, powered by Financial Juice. This has been George Avedon and Milton Maimonides. Thank you.